You asked for it once we hit 100,000 subscribers, we promised it, and we definitely didn't just remember it. Yes, it's the 100 best PS1 games, with just 2 games per franchise to keep things interesting. Let's rumble. Nintendo consoles might have had the run of things with Pokemon games across home consoles and handheld, but you know what PlayStation had? Digimon. And how did those games review? Best not to worry about it. Digimon World and its sequels have plenty of nostalgic love these days though, but Digimon Rumble Arena is actually still pretty playable today. Like how Digimon World gave us Pokemon-inspired turn-based RPGs, Rumble Arena is a Smash Bros. Style 2D brawler with traps, items and minigames. A Streets Won't Forget game on a console full of them. Silent Bomber might be a bit of an oxymoronic statement because when have you ever known a bomb to be quiet? Okay, maybe that one, but regardless, this top-down blow-em-up reinvented the tried and tested shoot-em-up mechanic by letting players run around a spaceship chucking explosives like Bomb Voyage from The Incredibles. Playing as Jutar, it's up to you to conquer the automated defences of the spaceship Dante by, you guessed it, lobbing bombs everywhere. Throughout the game's 14 levels, you'll find various bomb types and upgrades, giving what could have easily been a fun but repetitive arcade adventure quite a bit of depth. Look, we're not going to sit here and pretend that Hogs of War is some high art masterpiece and the best game ever made on the PS1. It's not, it's a Worms ripoff with the benefit of comedy legend Rick Mayall being his usual charismatic self in the voice booth, and that's all we need to hear. Essentially, if the song War Pigs was written like it was a Mr. Bean episode, Hogs of War sees multiple teams of piggies taking turns to fire weapons at each other. Again, it's just Worms, but 3D. But it works pretty well and is about as British as a good whinge.
Why does this guy hate us so?
Whether you prefer the original Tomba or its sequel, it's clear that the pink-haired feral cave child became something of an unsung hero on the PS1. Yeah, he might not be as recognisable as Cloud, Strife, Solid Snake or whoever the characters were from 40 Winks, but those who love Tomba have ensured he's remained a cult classic to this day. For what it's worth, Tomba 2 was a kitchen sink sequel over the original game with more of the same gameplay and structure, but bolstered by fully 3D environments and new power-ups. It's just a ton of fun. These days, the Tales of series is a worthwhile contender for the best RPG series crown, but back in the PS1 days, it was still in its infancy. That doesn't mean Namco weren't capable of a great RPG though, as Tales of Destiny proved to be an excellent sophomore effort for the series. As an action RPG, Tales of Destiny stood out on PS1 in a sea of turn-based games, and the game's story of adventures and sentient weapons allowed for plenty of mischief and whimsy. You want underrated RPGs on the PS1? Tales of Destiny provides it in spades. You probably won't be surprised to learn that Parappa the Rapper will feature on this list much later, but there's also the pretty great spin-off in Jamalawi that deserves a lot more recognition. Instead of a cool rapping dog, you play as a shy guitar-playing lamb that's preparing for a concert with their band Milk Can. Naturally, shenanigans occur. Gameplay-wise, it is the same formula as its predecessor, which is why it's much further down this ranking, but it's still incredibly fun, and you can unlock Parappa as a playable character, which is pretty damn cool. It's a good general rule of thumb that if a platform has some form of Metal Slug on it, it's one of the best shoot 'em ups you can play on that platform. Metal Slug X follows that mould for the PS1, as this remake of Metal Slug 2 using the MS3 engine takes what fans already loved about the original version and ups the ante. Yeah, this version of the game might be a lot harder, but with more weapons and power-ups, remixed music and improved backgrounds as well, Metal Slug X is one of the definitive Metal Slug experiences. Rest assured, it will beat your ass. If you like games about dungeon crawling and town management, As Your Dreams could be your next favourite obsession. Playing as the teenager Ko, you venture into the monster tower next to your town in the hopes of finding what happened to your dad. That dungeon crawling plays out in a roguelike-ish fashion, with your stats resetting and new layouts appearing every time, but you can recruit monsters which keep their levels. Outside of the tower, the gear, material and money you earn can be used to add new buildings to the town, adding more minigames and even romance opportunities. The PS1 wasn't the first console to bring light gun games to the home, but it definitely helped popularise the genre for that brief amount of time before people got a bit bored of them. Never us though, obviously, never us. Elemental Gearbolt is one such game and deserves plenty of praise for how it diversified itself from the competition. For starters, there is no reloading, which is always the worst part of any light gun shooter, but beyond that, Elemental Gearbolt also introduced some light RPG mechanics, with players able to upgrade their stats and abilities using the points scored during a level. Repetitive sure, but a right blast while it lasted. Capcom weren't slow to realise that they had a hit on their hands with Street Fighter 2 and its subsequent re-releases, so naturally they pivoted into spin-offs and parodies of their biggest success. Just look at Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, which also brings characters from Darkstalkers and Cyberbots into the fray. Instead of brawling in a traditional manner, Super Puzzle Fighter sees two players competing to create huge colour cascades, using crash gems to remove other gems of the same colour. Big chains means you can clog your opponent's board, creating a fiendish yet addictive competition for two players. Justin Wong also probably won't bully you in this one. There were a lot of genres that truly flourished on the PS1, though perhaps none more so than racing games. Think of your favourite games of all time on the console, chances are some of them are racing games. One that deserves a lot more love though is Roll Cage Stage 2. A gravity-defying head melt of a racing game. You've got a fast car, and big wheels that let you drive even if you flip upside down. With that, expect plenty of tracks with jumps, loops and weapons to fight at your rivals, everything an endlessly fun arcade racer needs. If racing games on PS1 flourished, then Square actively had an actual monopoly on RPGs. So many games came from Square during the PS1 era, and most of them are ranked here. The one that didn't get the same recognition as other games is Saga Frontier. Intended to be the fourth romancing saga game, Square spun it into its own thing, with this turn-based RPG telling multiple different stories across different playable protagonists in this ambitious science fantasy adventure. Between the characters interacting with each other during the journey and the non-linear approach to storytelling, Saga Frontier took a lot of wild swings and reaped a fine harvest. Arguably the original cozy game Harvest Moon, or Story of Seasons, I guess, kickstarted gaming's love affair with looking after a family member's farm and then marrying one of the villagers. While it started on SNES, the PS1's Harvest Moon Back to Nature improved the formula so much that it's been remade and re-released multiple times since. You've inherited your granddad's farm and you have 3 years to turn it around, otherwise the town is casting you out, which feels a bit harsh. Anyway, you've got tools to use, crops to farm and villagers to woo. Great stuff. If it wasn't for the loading times in Diablo being as long and annoying as a 10-hour compilation of Baby Shark, this would be the best action RPG on the PS1. Even with those wild loading times though, Diablo on PS1 is a pretty successful conversion of a PC action RPG being brought to console. One of the biggest examples of dark fantasy in gaming, Diablo pits adventurers against the hordes of the underworld for honour, glory and, most importantly, sick loot and bits and bobs. With a co-op mode that wasn't in the PC release, Diablo on PS1 managed to be an improvement on the original, apart from, those loading times. Don't worry, we're not blowing our legacy of Kane load this early in the list, it's just that one game tends to get more love than this one, but Blood Omen absolutely deserves a top 100 inclusion. The first game in the series, Blood Omen chronicles the origins of the recently turned Kane as he seeks revenge against his murderers and a cure for his vampirism. Let's see if he still wants that cure by the end of the game though, eh? A top-down action RPG, you're slaughtering enemies, finding loot and experiencing one of the more mature and dark stories on the original PlayStation. Gotta hand it to them, they started off very strong indeed. Sci-fi scrolling shooters based on Greek mythology seems like it'd be too weird and specific of a niche to become a proper genre, but if any other games in this genre whipped as much as Einhander, we'd be pretty happy. Taking place during the second war between the Earth and the Moon, which we all remember fondly, you control a lone fighter pilot zooming headfirst into the enemy forces to blast everything in sight. With multiple ship types to unlock, including some secrets, and plenty of gun pod power-ups to collect in-game with different weapon types, Einhander will have you competing for the high score run after run. Banging soundtrack too, really good. One of the best features of the PS1 that we'll always gush about is the fact that you could scan CDs and end up with cool things in game. Not many games used this feature though, but Monster Rancher certainly did, making for an excellent mix of cozy monster rearing and RPG combat. Players must raise their monsters to compete in various tournaments to win money and upgrade the monster's rank, unlocking more tourneys. Depending on the CD's metadata, you'll receive various different monsters, including a few special surprises. Cool blimey, isn't physical media so cool and interesting? Imagine killing it off. Anyway. Square might have cornered the RPG market on the PS1, but didn't stop Konami from having a go as well. Enter Vandal Hearts, a tactical RPG about empires at war, conspiracies, and corrupt officials. Turns out there's a lot of tactical RPGs about empires and conspiracies, but when they're fun to play, who cares? Admittedly, Vandal Hearts shares plenty of DNA with fellow tactical RPG Fire Emblem, but this is a worthwhile tactical adventure that shines on the PS1. Plus, there was a sequel, Vandal Hearts 2, that added more in the way of weapons, narrative choices, and a new turn system. You don't have to be brave to give it a go. Don't let Square's RPG-heavy library on the PS1 fool you, as they definitely boasted some variety in their lineup. Just look at Brave Fencer Musashi, a 3D platformer that, also has a couple of RPG elements. Look, it's not Final Fantasy levels of RPG, just imagine if Super Mario 64 had day and night cycles and insta-recover your health, and you're about there. Based rather loosely on the legendary Miyamoto Musashi, you control the titular swordsman as he's summoned to a parallel world to do some slashing. It's got pretty good voice acting, a great personality, and lovely graphics too, so give it a go if you haven't yet. Front Mission has long been an excellent hallmark of mecha tactics. We try not to talk about Front Mission Evolved or even worse, Left Alive. While the first two games are also enjoyable, though the first one isn't a PS1 game, Front Mission 3 might be the very best of the bunch. Front Mission 3 takes all the tactical features that fans loved about the previous games and basically doubled it with its double feature scenario. Essentially, there are two separate storylines running simultaneously, and that's always a laugh, isn't it? Come for the cool mechs, stay for the tactics. The great thing about upping the ranking to 100 games is being able to spotlight great games that were unfortunately a bit overshadowed. Both Luna games on PS1 fit that bill, and you bet we'll see the other one a little bit later, but for now let's talk about Silver Star Story Complete. A full remake of the Sega CD's original Luna the Silver Star, this complete edition largely follows the same story as the original, with players controlling Alex and a party of adventurers seeking to save the world. It's not the most complex RPG, narratively or mechanically, but it will skate its way into your hearts. It's a bit of a forced segue, but anyway. What's a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game doing so low on this list, you might be asking? It's a fair question, as the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games are arguably the most recognisable extreme sports games ever made, but this is a PS1 ranking unfortunately, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 did launch on the PS2. The future is now, or just in the year 2001, you get it, you get it. Still, THPS3 represented a revolution for the series with the introduction of the revert. Combos could be extended massively, scores increased exponentially, and levels even offered more interactivity. Phenomenal skateboarding outshined by the next generation. Wild Arms might not be the greatest RPG ever made, but it's proof that there should be more RPGs out there, either based on or loosely modelled after the Wild West. Turn-based combat that's also a duel at high noon? Yeah, sign us up. Set in Filgaia, a world that mixes medieval Europe with the American frontier, players control Rudy, Jack and Cecilia as they attempt to stop a band of rogue knights from reviving an ancient demon. Each character has their own unique tools and abilities, fleshing out their individual identities and making Wild Arms quite the memorable journey. If we were ranking fighting games on PS1 by how arcade perfect they are, Street Fighter Alpha 3 wouldn't come close. There are some missing frames of animation here, which leads to a lot of unintended infinite combos that originally weren't present, but home console fans did receive plenty of good things too. Alpha 3 for the PS1 added 6 new characters to the roster compared to the arcade release, 3 of them having to be unlocked through the New World Tour mode that acted like a mini RPG-like mode. Additional story for previously hidden characters too makes this an extensive port that's worth resurrecting in your library. Say what you want about the quality of Alien Resurrection as a movie, but the fact remains that not only does its game deserve its place among the best 100 PS1 games, it also deserves to be remembered in the Video Game Hall of Fame. You see, Alien Resurrection pioneered the twin-stick aiming / movement for FPS games on controller and was considered to be a bit weird for it at the time, but hey, look at us now. As for the game itself, it was already ice skating uphill by being based on the, at least then, worst Alien film, because Covenant is actually worse, don't argue me on this, but this is a pretty great slice of first-person horror that will beat you up. The fact we've gone this long as a channel without mentioning Dance Dance Revolution in some capacity is a pure failure on our behalf. We're sorry. By the time that the West were able to play DDR at home, the PS2 was already released, but that didn't stop those weird soft pads from becoming commonplace in homes across the world. Proof that gamers love buying additional peripherals for their games, but only for a couple of years, DDR and its successors / imitators became a huge hit in the home console market in the early to mid 2000s, and it's all because of this banger of a PS1 release. Bushido Blade 2 might not be the best weapons-based fighting game on the PS1, but it's definitely the most tense. If you've been around the channel long enough, you've heard it all before, but basically one strike be death in these clashes, giving every swing of your weapon that much more weight. Bushido Blade 2 improves on the original game with a story mode that isn't as obtuse, way more characters to choose from, and the introduction of dual swords. Some features might have been removed, but this is the Bushido Blade experience distilled down to its essentials. It was abundantly clear that by 1999, heading into the year 2000, people really wanted the success that Super Mario 64 received. Activision and Traveller's Tales had a go with Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the rescue, and you know what? They came closer than they had any right to. Playing as Buzz, you explore 10 different locations from the film in an attempt to collect Pizza Planet tokens and unlock new levels. With new power-ups to collect, bosses to fight, and puzzles to solve, this is an example of a competent imitator standing up to scrutiny. It still whips today, honestly. Another monster capture-style RPG, Jade Cocoon was innovative at the time because players could fuse their minions together to create some truly outlandish creatures, not the Despicable Me ones, just to clarify. With plenty of elements to muck about with and attacks to learn, you'll probably spend more time fusing than fighting. Complete with character designs from Studio Ghibli's Katsuya Kondo, players attempt to capture the strongest minions possible in the hopes of saving their village from both demons and a deadly curse. No pressure at all, easy stuff so long as you can tear yourself away from fusing. We're not going to lie to you and say that Breath of Fire 4 is better than 3 or anything silly like that, but what we are going to say is that it's a bit of a shame that Capcom haven't bundled all of them together into one collection for console yet. Breath of Fire 4 follows series tradition with the main characters Nina and Ryu, who are looking to confront an evil emperor. The combat and overall gameplay is more refined than its predecessor, though the story does have a nasty habit of waylaying the party and forcing you to complete some nonsense. But it's great nonsense still. Also, it looks bloody lovely. The reboot of one of the original founding fathers of the survival horror genre, Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, clearly was a product of the success of Resident Evil, which definitely isn't something that would happen again with the most recent remake. Instead of being set during the early 1900s, The New Nightmare moves the series up to present day, or present day as in 2001, with Edward Carnby and Aline Sedrak investigating the murder of Carnby's best friend on the aptly named Shadow Island. Sure hope there's no spooky monsters and ghouls hanging around. Come for the new metal vibes, stay for the surprisingly good graphics and spooky moments. Truth be told, if you wanted to sort the placement of both Luna games on our list of the 100 best PS1 games, you could. They're both great RPGs and, thankfully, much easier to play on modern consoles thanks to some recent re-releases. For our money though, the bigger story and more mature vibes mean that Luna 2 nestles nicely among other PS1 games at the time. Following a hero named, well, Hero, you're warned early on about a calamitous being called the Destroyer, and set out with your fellow friends / adventurers to prevent their return. With updated graphics and music, this is the definitive version of a great RPG that we fear not enough people have played. Perhaps the formative PS1 game for a lot of people, if you catch our meaning, Fear Effect offered players a blend of both sci-fi, cyberpunk and Eastern mythology to create something weird, unique and genuinely unlike other games at the time. It was also about as easy as saying Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers while Peter pickles your pepper. Spread out over 4 discs because of the FMV backgrounds, players control a group of mercs as they try to find the daughter of a powerful triad boss, only to run afoul of both future goons and literal demons. The gooners would come later. Perhaps try Ace's most recognisable RPG franchise, Star Ocean still feels like a relative unknown compared to the big hitters of the genre. To be fair, it probably doesn't help that the series arguably peaked with its second iteration, though Star Ocean: The Second Story is a touch above most other RPGs. Set 20 years after the events of the original game, you control Claude as he's mistakenly teleported to a strange planet and told that he's the hero of light. Suddenly, big bad evil guys emerge and you recruit a band of heroes to stand against them in fun, real-time battles that also look bloody beautiful. Perhaps no game on the PS1 helped to tell the console's ingenuity and character more than Incredible Crisis, because this is one of those games that simply needs to be experienced. If you want to play a game that constantly makes you ask the question, the hell am I looking at? Incredible Crisis delivers in spades. Essentially just a collection of minigames held together by a bonkers story, Incredible Crisis follows 4 members of a standard Japanese family returning home for Grandma's birthday. The journey, however, is less than smooth. Expect shenanigans and chaos in this unforgettable romp through Tokyo. Be a lad and play it. Ark the Lad Collection feels like a really early take on something that's now become much more commonplace in the gaming industry, which is to take a series and just bundle it into one cohesive game. To be fair to Working Designs and Sony though, Ark the Lad's 3 games never launched outside of Japan until the collection arrived in 2002, and the wait was certainly worth it. Across 3 games, Ark the Lad tells the story of the titular character along with various other playable characters who appear in their own games, as they work to stop the resurrection of the Dark One. Honestly, why is it never the well-lit one? You know, the big light one, that'd scare me. Fighting games have been no stranger to crossovers, with Marvel vs. Capcom already dominating arcades and home consoles by the time this game rolled around. For true fighting game sickos though, the question of who'd win in a fight between Ryu and Kyo needed an answer, and Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000 provided answers. While it took a while for CVS to come to PS1, Capcom definitely eased the wait by offering the Pro version, which offered more characters like Joe and Dan, along with new moves and modes. A banger fighter that still looks great. Had we been given the power to greenlight any RPGs, we definitely want more to be set in Wales, Cumbria and Bath, which is why Kudelka always has a special place in our hearts. If you want to experience an RPG with exploration that's reminiscent of Resident Evil, Kudelka is the hidden gem that you need to seek out imminently. Following the titular protagonist, a Romani psychic, you travel to a seemingly abandoned monastery in Wales, only to find it's not actually abandoned and there's monsters in basically every bloody room. Pairing up with an adventurer and a priest, both with some really excellent voice acting, you'll have an samsarabecausetacos. Shoot 'em ups or shmups might not be the world-beating genre it once was when they were dominating arcades, so you know that a series is brilliant when it's still getting releases and remakes in the modern day. If R-Type Delta wasn't as good as it was, we probably wouldn't be getting new R-Type releases today. As a horizontal shmup, R-Type Delta is about as fundamental as it gets. There's different fighters you can choose from, each with their own weapon loadouts, and Delta even introduced a dose system, which lets you charge super attacks by absorbing attacks, adding risk/reward to this pretty wonderful formula. The way that both fans and Atlas tend to act, you'd think that the Persona series emerged out of the primordial ooze at Persona 3, with the earlier parts of the series just being resigned to history. Ignore that though, as all 3 Persona games on PS1 are phenomenal experiences. While we spotlighted Persona 2 Innocent Sin, which sees a party of high schoolers and friends dealing with a reality-bending rumour monger named Joker, no relation, both Persona 1 and Persona 2 sequel Eternal Punishment make for a great trilogy of its own. Chuck these ones on modern platforms sometime soon, eh lads? Chances are that if you owned a PS1 at the time it came out, you played a Wipeout game. Now, Wipeout 3 might not have been the picture of more is better, considering 2097 is a nigh faultless arcade racing experience, but there's also no such thing as a bad Wipeout game, and Wipeout 3 is bloody brilliant. A continuation of what Psygnosis had built over the previous 2 games, Wipeout 3 offers more of the same in terms of gameplay and music, while also introducing this minimalistic art style that came to define the PS1/turn of the millennium identity. Publish another one, Sony, you cowards and frauds. It is so strange to do a ranking for a PlayStation console where GTA doesn't make it into the top 10, never mind the top 50. That's not to say that GTA 2 isn't good or fun, as this top-down open-world crime caper definitely offers plenty of amusement, even if it's just mowing down Hare Krishnas. It's just that it'd take another mainline installment for Rockstar to overtake the Driver series. Set in Anywhere City, you take missions from various crime lords and other ne'er-do-wells, rising through the ranks of the criminal underworld in the process. Guess GTA didn't change that much over the years. During the PS1 era, space simulation games were generally considered to be the domain of PC, but Psygnosis weren't having any of it, bringing Colony Wars to PS1. Granted, Colony Wars doesn't let you chart a course through the galaxy and become the spacefaring brigand you've already dreamed of, but it's still an ambitious bit of space fighting. Players pick from one of several starfighter ships and complete a series of missions across various acts, but instead of being purely linear, the decisions you make and whether you succeed or fail will alter the path of the campaign, which is pretty cool stuff. We don't see enough of that. It's a real shame that the Need for Speed franchise is basically kind of dead at this point, because from Need for Speed 3 to around Carbon, they're some of the best racing games you could ever play. Plus, Hot Pursuit reminded everyone that street racing is fun because of crime. As a game, NFS 3 offers more of the same street racing that players had become accustomed to by now, albeit with much stronger pursuit mechanics. Throw in some minor levels of car tuning and there's something here for every kind of racing game fan. Whoever at Namco decided to rename the series from Air Combat to Ace Combat with the second game actually deserves some kind of Lifetime Achievement Award, because that's a name with a lot more sauce. Air Combat, yeah, I sure hope there is, there's a jet on the cover. Ace Combat though, that's sick, let's go recreate Top Gun. Ace Combat 2 continues the arcadey flight sim gameplay the original game introduced, along with branching mission paths, new features such as enemy aces to hunt down and more across 20 levels. There's a reason Ace Combat is still the top dog at, well, dog fighting. The benefit of extending to the top 100 best PS1 games is being able to praise the predecessor of a much better sequel. Suikoden 2 is often considered to be the pinnacle of the franchise, and you'll definitely be seeing it later on, but that means the first entry tends to fall by the wayside. Not so much now, considering there's a remastered collection of the first two games, but still. Loosely based on an old Chinese novel, Suikoden tasked players with finding and recruiting 108 warriors to overthrow a tyrannical government. It's like Seven Samurai with an additional 101 lads. When it comes to racing games on the PS1, people will celebrate Wipeout, Gran Turismo and Need for Speed almost immediately, but the Colin McRae rally games deserve credit and recognition for how accessible and fun they made an entire discipline of motorsport. Based on the World Rally Championship as it was in the year 2000, you've got all the licensed cars and stages from that era, along with new modes like Arcade, which ditched the time trial method of rally racing for something more direct. Throw in legendary cars from rally tournaments of years gone by, and this is pure rally, plain and simple. You know, the library for a console is absolutely stacked when Dragon Quest can't even crack the top 50. One of the most celebrated and adored RPG franchises of all time, and there's still over 50 games that are deserving a place in this ranking. Like other Dragon Quest games, you control a hero and a party of their friends, with this entry following them as they explore the islands and ruins of Estard. It's a long story and far more challenging than it looks, and just one of the greatest RPGs ever. But does it let you throw holy hand grenades? The ultimate multiplayer party game, Worms Armageddon had already entertained PC players throughout the entirety of 1999 by the time it came to the PS1, but it was well worth the wait. Worms works best when you've got up to 3 of your friends gathered around the same screen, firing bazookas and slurs at each other. Along with the high degree of customization that Worms is known for, including teams and levels, Worms Armageddon was finally the game to introduce a single player offering, so even if you're on your lonesome, you could still enjoy Worms. It's just, better with friends. Right, time for a segue. We can practically guarantee with a large degree of certainty that if you owned a PS1, you also had some kind of plastic pistol controller that you bought, probably secondhand from a car boot sale or something like that. The reason why is probably because of Time Crisis, one of the most recognisable arcade games in history. It'd take 2 years from its monumental arcade release for Time Crisis to come to PS1, but it was still fantastic fun. The Gun-Con controller felt just as good as the arcade version, and the PS1 release included new levels and content too. Plus you didn't have to pester your dad for coins anymore. Number 50, Legend of Legaia. It's not going to take you long into this list to discover that the original PlayStation may honestly be the greatest console ever as far as RPGs go. Legend of Legaia is the first in a pretty long line of genre definers on the console. Though it's fair to say that the exploits of Ivan and his Punch Pals isn't the best RPG on the console, its unique turn-based combat with combos that feel a bit like a fighting game, fantastic character models, and wonderfully anime as hell story that may honestly remind you a bit of Attack on Titan make it one of the most distinct games on the platform and well worth seeking out. While many franchises used Sony's first console as a springboard for the generations to come, it's a bit baffling that the brilliant Legend of Legaia has only ever had one other game, and that came on the PS2 over 20 years ago. At least port this one, Sony, come on. Number 49, WWF SmackDown 2, Know Your Role. I can't tell you how many times I played the same few sections in career mode over and over again in this game because I didn't have a memory card at the time. While the first SmackDown game on PS1 was certainly no slouch, Know Your Role genuinely felt like the perfect distillation of everything brilliant going on with WWF at the time, with huge attitude, amazing entrances, for the time, realistic move animations, and all the content a kid without a Sky or cable setup could ever need to make their very own WWF. Obviously, a good few parts of it have aged about as well as most of what Shawn Michaels did while he was in D-Generation X, and the arcadiness of the wrestling can't hold a candle to the simulation style of No Mercy on N64, but WWF SmackDown 2 was the perfect digital revolution to match the one going on in the wrestling industry itself at the same time. Number 48, Alundra. While the 3D revolution was evident in every pixel on Funaki's face in WWF SmackDown 2, the OG PlayStation also had plenty of incredible 2D games to its name as well, one of them being a name you might not be too familiar with, Alundra. A little bit derided at the time of release for its 16-bit vibe, Alundra is an action-adventure game in a similar vein to Zelda, except with a bit of Inception chucked in as you play as the titular dream botherer as he tries to help people on an island out within their dreams. While perhaps most famous for its puzzles that were almost certainly devised by the people who wronged the monkeys in 28 Days Later, Alundra's morose philosophical story, gorgeous visuals, and consistently surprising depth in exploration and its people make it a game that shouldn't be slept on. Don't boo me, I'm right, boo you. Number 47, Valkyrie Profile. Some games don't ever get their due, or even just a nod towards how ahead of the curve they actually were. Valkyrie Profile is one such game, as it feels like we see a lot of the DNA in Tri-Aces RPG in modern games. From the ability to recruit the undead to your cause like sad Pokemon with deep backstories, to the fact that the game switches between platforming, turn-based combat, and the ability to fly around the world, this is a crazily ambitious game for the dawn of the new millennium. Chuck in 24 playable characters and some rather gorgeous visuals that really stood up well, and you have the definition of a cult classic. Lenneth's story might be preferred by some in its PSP version, but wherever you play it, Valkyrie Profile is a game that will constantly surprise you with the swings it takes and how many of them it hits. Number 46, Ridge Racer Type 4. Ridge Racer Type 4 sums up just the general feel of the PlayStation like few games ever managed to. This image alone is really transportative for me back to a time of Pogs, Salt and Lineker, and just so much Phantom Menace merch. So much. Ridge Racer Type 4 nailed the attitude of the PlayStation perfectly, but it also nailed 3D racing like few other games on the console managed to either. You could also become Pac-Man's Ultimate Digivolution, which is cool. With over 300 car models, yes 300, an almost unnecessarily deep story mode, an absolute banger of a soundtrack, and the perfect mix of gameplay styles, Ridge Racer Type 4 was the antidote for those who wanted to crunch a few less numbers and sweat the corners a little less than what Gran Turismo asked of them. Number 45, Klonoa, Door to Phantomile. Apart from a few bad apples, the 5th generation was a golden era for another genre, the platformer. We were certainly spoiled for choice in between the Plumbers, Jorts Botherers and Limbless Wonders, so it's a shame that Klonoa Door to Phantomile still remains a tad overlooked. A 2.5D side-scroller with 3D environment, Klonoa follows the titular raccoon dog cat boy as he looks to stop Phantomile from being turned into a nightmare. Armed with your magic ring friend, you'll be grabbing enemies and chucking them about like they're funaki, basically using them as the platform to get around the levels, which is pretty neat. Though it does have its fair share of dark moments, Klonoa is a refreshingly whimsical, breezy platformer that isn't ashamed to be the antithesis to the rebellious, edgy attitude of the 1990s as a whole. Check it out! On your nearest emulator though, Jesus wept, or in its PS4 remake. Number 44, Breath of Fire 3. There are many RPG franchises that just scream PlayStation when they come to mind, and while the first two games were on the SNES, many fans will probably think Breath of Fire really came into its own on the PS1. While the fourth game is no slouch, especially visually, Breath of Fire 3's story of a shapeshifting dragon lad who's looking to find out more about his origins in an era-hopping adventure features some really likeable characters and fantastic attention to detail to boot. Though the soundtrack feels a little bit out of place at times and the loading times can be egregious at times, Breath of Fire 3 is a gorgeous isometric RPG that lets you live out your dreams of becoming a dragon. I still want to be Metal Greymon one of these days, and I still want Breath of Fire 3 and 4 on modern consoles, please. Number 43, PaRappa the Rapper.
Stop the car. We got an emergency, can't you see? Do you know why we stopped the car? Do I know why we stopped the car?
You can keep your Marshall the Mathers. The streets will never forget PaRappa the Rapper. It may look and sound too simplistic to be anything of substance these days, but there's a reason why rhythm games like PaRappa and something like Space Channel 5 were such cult bangers. Well, they're just really fun. When they're not absolutely battering you, of course. The catchiness of each tune here though offsets the game's punishing difficulty, which is handy because you will probably be hearing the same song over and over to the point where you will want to kick, punch and chop your console into a fine paste. While you're probably going to end up hating chicken by the end of the game, PaRappa the Rapper is still a super enjoyable bit of silliness that doesn't take itself too seriously, that you probably won't ever see get published by Sony ever again. And that's a bit sad really. Number 42, Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor genuinely felt like the digital version of Saving Private Ryan on your PS1, except you didn't have to deal with Faraday from Lost being a massive annoying wimp. Get a grip! Looking at it now, you probably won't realise it unless you were there at the time of its release, chugging Lucozade and chucking grenades accidentally aplenty, but Medal of Honor felt like a genuinely huge step forwards in terms of bringing the cinematic feel to your home consoles, including a massive sweeping orchestral score, a wild range in enemy animations, and a genuine sense of scale of the conflict. Medal of Honor is a little fiddly to go back to these days, but it and its sequel Underground picked up the baton left by GoldenEye to point towards the future of console FPS games in bombastic style. Subscribe. Number 41, Chrono Cross. If Chrono Cross was called by a slightly different name like Buongiorno Cross or something, and it had no connection to Chrono Trigger at all, it would probably be loved twice as much as it already is. But thanks to a couple of controversial decisions, Surge's timeline hopping One Piece side story is slightly polarizing, and it's easy to see why it might rub some up the wrong way. Make no mistake though, from its complex, challenging narrative to its gorgeous visuals to its brilliant, engaging cast of characters, all 45 of them, Chrono Cross is a real RPG gem on the PS1 that should be sailing its way into your library soon if it isn't already. Yes, it's not Chrono Trigger, but what is really? Approach it with that in mind and you will have a great time. Number 40, Driver. Handbrake. Yeah, handbrake is triangle. Slalom. How do we slalom? Oh my god. While it's perhaps most notorious for its famously hard tutorial, which you can check out on our second channel by the way, there's more to Driver than just its underground parking lots. In fact, that's probably one of the easiest parts of the game. Driver isn't for the faint of heart, but Reflections' 1999 Drive 'em Up captured not only the feel of movies like Bullet and Ronin, but also the feeling of driving a muscle car like few games before it, with a sense of weight that really just still feels great today. Chuck in some amazing car degradation physics, several open worlds to race against cops in, and a wonderfully cheesy mid-afternoon detective show story, and Driver is brilliant fun as long as you know what a slalom is. Number 39, Rayman. Now, if you think the tutorial in Driver is hard, you, like me, may have mentally compartmentalized some of the later levels in Rayman. This game is trickier than it is for Rayman himself to take effective glucosamine tablets. A side-scrolling platformer which focuses on the limbless Wonder as he tries to recover the Great Protoon from Mr. Dark, Rayman may look, sound, and even sometimes feel like a Saturday morning cartoon, but many of you watching this probably weren't as traumatized by Street Sharks as you were Space Mama's Crater here. Big up Street Sharks, by the way. With awesome animations, amazing music, and more things to collect than a mid-2000s indie pop band, Rayman might be best played these days with save states to save your mental health. But the core brilliance here would go on to launch a brilliant franchise that deserves way, way better. Number 38, Bloody Roar 2. Speaking of franchises and fans that deserve better, it's really baffling just how little we've seen of Bloody Roar in general for the past 20 years. What? The first Bloody Roar game is a good proof of concept that proved that yes, actually, you know what, kicking someone's head in as a rabbit woman is pretty fun, but the sequel turned everything up a notch. Refining the action with even smoother 60 FPS action, better character models, and music that always goes hard, Bloody Roar 2's simple thrill of transforming into your beast alter ego mid-fight was the absolute hypest thing to tell your friends about on the playground back in the day, and it's still, let me tell you, pretty hype. Bloody Roar is, yeah, okay, it's not the most balanced or competitively minded fighting game of all time, but it's certainly one of just the most fun, and isn't that what we're all here for anyway? It's also got 16:9 support, so that's cool. Number 37, The Legend of Dragoon. One thing is pretty consistent across most JRPGs. There's always someone or something looking to put an end to the world, and there will probably also be a dragon in there somewhere. It's kind of crazy that The Legend of Dragoon has been pretty much nowhere for all these years though. In The Legend of Dragoon, you play as protagonist Dart, and it's up to players to take control of a team of heroes as they seek out the soul of the god of destruction and aim to save humanity. Dart is no ordinary hero though, as he can transform into a dragoon and turn the tides of battle. Some things in The Legend of Dragoon may feel and look pretty familiar, particularly when it comes to the party menu, but there's more than enough here to sink your teeth into, including the amazing visuals, charming characters, and its gigantic scale. Dragon pun not intended. This really should have spun off into Sony's own Final Fantasy, but it was never meant to be. We could have had The Legend of Dragoon, the spirits within, people. We were so close. Number 36, Spider-Man. Far from the first or last Spider-Man game to hit consoles, this PS1 adventure stood out primarily for its truly impressive, for the time, web swinging, which was powered by the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater engine, and its absolutely crazy wealth of cameos, nods to the comic books, and just a general reverence for the source material. Also, Black Cat for reasons I shan't elaborate on. Venom though is far from Spidey's only problem in this game, as villains like Rhino and Mysterio pop up to wreak havoc and cause trouble for the webhead. But you can even team up with other Marvel heroes like Daredevil, Captain America and Punisher, and that just wouldn't happen nowadays really. They did try it with Midnight Suns and none of you bought it. Go buy it. It's really good. Though a little clunky by today's standards, the symbiote-driven storyline, ability to chuck couches at dudes, and just general vibes are worth putting up with some antiquated edges, especially if you want to see what Spidey thinks of the word arse. Number 35, Wipeout 2097. You're not going to get a racing game like Wipeout from a big publisher these days. I mean, look at the lack of F-Zero for proof of that. And while there are some indie bangers like Redout to play instead, they just don't capture the same magic. Wipeout 2097 was a massive leap up for the series and Psygnosis as a developer, with 2097 making the original Wipeout feel like a breakneck proof of concept rather than the powerhouse showcase for the power of PlayStation this brilliant sequel turned out to be. Including new features like the ability to take down your opponents and just heaps more content overall, 2097 feels like the 1990s the video game in the best possible way. In 1996, it captured the futuristic cyberpunk grunginess of the inbound new millennium fantastically well, with a sense of speed that's difficult to master, but incredibly rewarding when you do. Now I just gotta live for another 73 years and see if Psygnosis were correct. Number 34, Tenchu 2, Birth of the Stealth Assassins. While stealth, usually involving some kind of tall grass and giant floating arrow, is a regular part of most AAA third-person games these days, you don't really get many stealth games like Tenchu 2, Birth of the Stealth Assassins. A prequel to the first game that refines a lot of its rougher edges with smoother movement, incredible sound design, and deeper sneaking mechanics, it's easy to see why Tenchu fans tend to veer towards Rikimaru's origin story when discussing the best games in the series. Wrath of Heaven will always be my number one, but Tenchu 2 isn't too far behind. Tenchu 2 still looks great today, despite some rather wild draw distance issues that are a bit unavoidable in some 3D games from the era, but you might still get a kick out of creating your own levels Timesplitters style with programmable enemies that you will end up just spawning in the middle of a bunch of traps anyway. More like Birth of the Sociopaths, eh? Number 33, Xenogears. Xenogears was the debut title in a series that thrives well into the 21st century, even as spiritual successors. In it, players traverse the continent of Ignas amidst an endless war and become central to the conflict and the safety of the world when a new threat arrives. Rather than just stick to traditional combat with increasingly compensatory swords, Square also introduced mech-like robots called gears. This Gundam-esque element changed how battles unfolded and also gave Xenogears an aesthetic and feel unlike anything else out there. While it does fall apart a little, quite a bit on the second disc, Xenogears' heady topics, huge scale and gorgeous graphics make it one of the most compelling video game messes of all time. Not bad at all for a rejected Final Fantasy VII pitch. Number 32, Dino Crisis 2. Dino Crisis 2 is nuts. It's just a nuts video game. It's basically the original game, but if someone just kept going and then over and over and over and over and adding more and more and more nonsense, and I love it. From time-travelling daughters to obnoxiously large dinosaurs to orbital lasers, Dino Crisis 2 is a very extra video game that drops a lot of the survival horror aspects of its predecessor for a more action-focused approach. The giant score counter at the top of the screen and the combo should clue you in that you can come out from behind the couch and just start blasting. However, that doesn't mean that Dino Crisis 2 isn't fun, as the game's bonkers plot, banger soundtrack, more vibrant world and fast tempo make it the textbook definition of a blockbuster rental that you won't quickly forget. Number 31, Siphon Filter 2. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if Siphon Filter 2 is the best aged game on here. In fact, it might be one of the worst aged games, thanks to some awkward controls, stiff voice acting, and bizarrely diagonal sprinting. However, its importance for the OG PlayStation and third-person shooters overall, and just how much fun it still is, cannot be understated. A pretty challenging sequel where you again play as Gabe Logan, with Lian Jing also making her playable debut as you try to stop the titular virus from killing the latter. Siphon Filter 2 builds on the first game with tighter controls, bigger levels, and even the introduction of PvP multiplayer. Fans of espionage action will probably get a huge kick out of Siphon Filter 2's moody chaos, huge bevy of weapons including the iconic taser and cinematic spectacle, even if listening to Gabe's voice actor today is sometimes like listening to Steven Seagal trying to order fish and chips from a Chinese restaurant. Number 30, Twisted Metal 2 World Tour. Twisted Metal 2 pits a band of serial killers, psychos, Twitter premium subscribers, and misguided heroes in a race to the finish line. Except the track is littered with bodies and the winner is the last one standing. Sony's landmark vehicular combat game is a silly, over-the-top explosive bit of fun that's going to take you a while to master and not get constantly exploded in, as you're one of several lunatics fighting for the sake of redemption and power. The fiery clown Needles Kane, the curious Marcus, the tormented Axel, and the revenge-seeking Mortimer get behind the wheel of iconic rides in this unforgettable PS1 classic that tidies up a lot of the original's rough edges while also finding more of its own identity. Yes, it's not the deepest game in the world, but not every game needs to be, especially when you've got a friend to play with you. It's been far too long since we had a new Twisted Metal game, and Destruction All-Stars was not it. Number 29, Medieval 2. Medieval is a series that's done a lot better than Twisted Metal in terms of games in recent years, with the first game in particular getting a lot of second chances. It's the second game though that we think deserves a spot on our list, and even a remake of its own. Come on Sony, finish the job, don't leave it half done. Medieval 2 picks up the goofy, charming marker left by its predecessor and classes things up with some lovely Victorian outfits and Gatling guns for Daniel, with silly boxing match set pieces featuring detached limbs really just summing up the off-the-wall brilliance of Medieval as a whole. The platforming may drive you a little nuts these days, but the cheeky gothic Aardman atmosphere, amazing graphics and jaunty soundtrack make this the best game inside Tim Burton's brain that we never got. Anyone else think this was terrifying when they were young though? It is kind of messed up. I definitely had nightmares from this. Number 28, Ape Escape. Anyone who played the Ape Escape section in Astrobot will probably be as confused as every other Ape Escape fan for the last 20 years when trying to figure out where the new games have been. The series is just pure silly brilliance, with the first game in the series being a fantastic debut that oozes offbeat charm, some mad funky beats, and more monkeys than any man could ever know what to do with. Maybe a spot of diamond mining? The story focuses on Spectre, who is basically like Charles Xavier meets Caesar from Planet of the Apes, as he makes his fellow monkeys get up to mischief across different time periods. Playing as Spike, you must sneak up on the damn dirty apes while using all of the tools at your disposal, but most importantly, a really big net. You really couldn't ask for a better introduction to the DualShock than this pure PlayStation icon. Number 27, Crash Team Racing. You might think it's crazy that Crash Team Racing gets in here over a second mainline Crash game, but honestly, this remains one of the most pick up and play kart races ever, even 25 years on. Garfield, just go home mate. While the N64 had Mario Kart 64 and Diddy Kong Racing, Crash Team Racing was making its home on the PlayStation, with more attitude, more speed and more jaunt. Crash Team Racing looks, plays and sounds great even nowadays, with a fully realised adventure mode that lets you collect keys and take on boss tracks with the ultimate goal of taking on nitrous oxide. As long as you don't lose your mind going for collectibles before then, that is. Crash Team Racing is a classic that's almost certain to send a lapsed fan back in time when they hear the bass line for Insanity Beach all over again, and yes, it has been remade, but this just hits a little bit different. Number 26, Soul Blade. Known as Soul Edge in its native Japan, Soul Blade is the genesis of the Soul Calibur series, everyone's favourite fighting franchise featuring Darth Vader. Masters of Terraskasi just missed out on this list, guys, just missed out. Built off the back of Tekken with the simple thought of what if more sword, Soul Blade does more than enough of its own thing to feel like something completely different, and not just because of Edgebuster, which sounds like a Twitch mod's favourite mode. From the range of weapons you can unlock per character, to the almost goofy verticality, to the amazing character models and eye-catching stages that you can boot people out of, which is the best feature, Soul Blade was a weird, wild and wonderful game with the added benefit of not letting your cheesiest friend play as Nightmare, for them to then just go and spam the same two moves over and over again. You know who you are. Number 25, Spyro the Dragon. When the villainous nasty Nork overtakes the dragon homeworld and imprisons all other dragons, presumably for being given that terrible name, it's up to the young dragon Spyro, who you might call Spyro the Dragon, to set out on an epic adventure that would end up shaping millions of childhoods. Spyro may not look like he's up to much, but the young dragon has a trick or two up his sleeves as he looks to free his fellow dragons. Spyro had a sense of momentum and speed that was pretty unusual for platformers at the time, with Spyro's Zinedine Zidane technique and flying abilities, along with the game's more whimsical, fantastical feel, helping it to stand apart in what was beginning to become a golden age for the genre. Stick the soundtrack on for about 7 seconds and there's a good chance you will make a millennial cry. But this won't be the last time we see the purple dragon in this video. Number 24, Mega Man X4. For many Mega Man fans, Mega Man X4 is the pinnacle of a series that boasts dozens of iconic games, and also that weird soccer one. Considering it only just makes the top 25 here, it shows just how insanely stacked the PlayStation was for all timers. Guys, this was really hard. The first game to let you properly play as Zero throughout, Mega Man X4 might not have been the jaw-dropping 3D Mega Man of the future some were hoping for, but it still does a lot of things that can leave you slack-jawed. From the stunning backdrops to the amazing animations to the mature story to the massive bosses, this isn't a game that lets two dimensions be a millstone. Yeah, some of the voice acting famously ain't great, but don't let that take away from just how good the cinematic moments hold up overall. Bring back anime cutscenes in games, please. Number 23, Tekken 2. Few games have ever managed to gather friends around a CRT to end up in blood feuds for the rest of their lives, quite like the Tekken series. While the first game was a very solid starting point, Tekken 2 is where the series really began to find itself. Everything here was simply taken up a notch, and not just because King Chad Roger was added to the roster. Want crisper moves, easier ways to learn, tons more content, and crazy good graphics at 60 frames per second? You got it. Tekken 2 is one of the games responsible for giving the PlayStation its cooler edge over the competition, and your PlayStation collection simply isn't complete without it. But another Tekken game edges it out later on in our list. Number 22, Tomb Raider. It boggles the mind to think where third-person 3D action-adventure games and PlayStation in general would be without Lara Croft, even if Tomb Raider did actually come to Saturn first. An incredibly ambitious and magnificently realised game from devs who were basically worked to the bone to get it completed in time, Tomb Raider changed the very face of gaming as we know it, with Lara becoming an icon almost overnight. She was one of the first characters, not in dungarees of course, to make it into the mainstream, and then you just couldn't get away from her. Tomb Raider boasted an incredibly cinematic scale for its time, and while it might have aged in quite a few obvious places, there's still something about the original Tomb Raider today that feels like a welcome time machine. Just don't make me do the mines again. I can't go back. I won't go back. Number 21, Gran Turismo. While Tomb Raider was designed and released in record time, Polyphony took their sweet time to make the original Gran Turismo. You don't redefine exactly what racing games can be overnight, of course. This has been said a few times in this video, but you really cannot undermine just how incredible Gran Turismo looked, played, and felt back at the time of its release. Honestly, it felt like we'd hopped in a DeLorean and had just skipped a generation. The attention to detail bordered on the obsessive, and it would make millions of living rooms, common areas, and dormitories obsessed as well. Packed with over 100 cars and more funky beats than Mike Tyson versus Funky Kong in an exhibition boxing match, Gran Turismo is the highest rated PS1 game on Metacritic for a good reason, but we do prefer the second game, as you'll see soon enough. Number 20, Dino Crisis. What if Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, and Resident Evil had a baby? Players found out in 1999 with Dino Crisis, a dinosaur-driven survival horror experience from the creator of Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami. Coming off the heels of Resident Evil 2, Dino Crisis had some pretty hefty shoes to fill, and while it might have overcooked the plot a little bit in that kind of brilliantly cheesy way, it certainly delivered on the dinosaur action and scares, with dinosaurs coming out of the woodwork more than secrets and receipts for baby oil in Hollywood. Dino Crisis still has a cult following today, and while it never quite reached Resident Evil status, it's impossible to deny its place in the survival horror pantheon. It's impossible to get Capcom to give this game a proper modern port outside of a subscription service too, apparently. Why'd you do that? Regina deserves better. Number 19, Parasite Eve. Some games aren't meant for everyone. You will realise Parasite Eve might not be your mum's favourite game the second an entire theatre full of people burst into flames, and also rats are turning into crocodile dogs. An absolutely balmy, brilliant horror RPG with a unique battle system that allows you to move outside of your turn, Parasite Eve follows Aya Brea as she attempts to stop Eve from turning the citizens of Manhattan into giant satsumas. Parasite Eve is a fantastically experimental, unapologetically shocking game with some of the best visuals on the console, as well as a general mood and storyline that feels completely unlike anything else in this generation or much since. This one's for the freakazoids and we love it. We just wish Square would as well. Number 18, Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. Speaking of being for the freaks, Oddworld Abe's Odyssey casts you as the titular Madokan after he's captured for overhearing the sinister plan to turn his kind to the newest influencer crossover meal at McDonald's. Sidebar, what the fuck's a Rizzler? Abe's Odyssey is an unforgiving and sometimes frustrating platformer with the kind of vibe and aesthetic that simply can never be replicated. It's not a horror game as such, but even Resident Evil hasn't come up with the ability to let you take over the minds of enemies and make them kill their friends. And also, Chris Redfield can't fart on command. Abe's Odyssey was followed up by the arguably just as brilliant Exodus, and has also received a more recent remake, but there's something about the PS1 look and feel that makes the original far, far harder to shake. Number 17, Suikoden 2. When Konami wasn't too busy terrifying players with scary towns or a lack of licenses, it was busy with Suikoden, a strategic RPG series that may not have been loved by many, but those who did love it really loved it for a good reason. Building on its also great predecessor, Suikoden 2 is anything but a small game, as players can recruit more than 100 characters and take many of them onto the battlefield. The way those characters synergize with Ryu, both on the battlefield and off it, offers just about the craziest amount of depth of any RPG on the PS1. While the pixel art compared to the mind-boggling effects of 3D RPGs of the time may have been partly why it commercially struggled, hence why physical copies of this go for silly amounts, they give Suikoden 2 a truly timeless charm today. Number 16, Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. Blood Omen Legacy of Kain launched a series of vampiric dramas that would hop between genres more than David Bowie on uppers. Soul Reaver took the titular Kain and his ex-lieutenant, ex-Jaw owner Raziel into the mainstream in a big way though. Playing as the damned Raziel, players guide the Wraith on his path of vengeance in one of the PS1's most haunting, disquieting games that feels a little bit like The Legend of Zelda, but if you substituted the early struggle and eventual glory for just more struggle. Crystal Dynamics crafted a superb story with some truly fantastic performances that set a standard for acting in video games, with the ability to shift between planes also being truly revolutionary for the time. They don't make them like Soul Reaver anymore. Number 15, Resident Evil. Just in the same way, something like Tekken got people off their couches to scream in frustration as Law did the same 2 kicks over and over again, Resident Evil got them jumping behind the couch. While games like Alone in the Dark might have laid the groundwork, Resident Evil was the first time when horror gaming truly felt like it could hold a candle to its big screen counterpart. Chris and Jill's No Good Terrible Night Out in the Spencer Mansion has plenty of weird anachronisms these days, and you obviously know the drill when it comes to the acting, but the original was and still is a deeply unsettling, undeniable epoch in video game history that would basically shape the 3D horror space forever. But it isn't our favourite Resi game on the PS1. No, it's not Survivor either. Number 14, Grandia. When a young boy called Justin comes across a magic stone, it kicks off the journey of a lifetime, both for him and the players young enough to experience this gem in their formative years. Originally released on Sega's Saturn only in Japan, Grandia is a gorgeous 2D RPG with an irresistibly wholesome charm at a time when most RPGs were digging deeper and deeper into dark themes. It's a bright and refreshingly whimsical RPG, which might explain a bit of why it got a little less love in an era brimming with attitude. But the themes and general tone of Grandia are timeless, and the game is still an absolutely wonderful treat today. If you want a breezy, approachable RPG that doesn't skimp on scope while still providing plenty of gameplay depth, Grandia remains a grand adventure and a half. Number 13, Gran Turismo 2. Gran Turismo 2 built upon the foundation laid by the original, improving the mechanics while also adding much more content to deliver a smooth and enjoyable racing simulator that still plays remarkably well today. And hey, it doesn't do this nonsense to you, which is cool. Obviously, Gran Turismo 2 in 2024 and beyond is going to feel just a little bit clunkier, a little jaggier by today's standards, and yeah, the pop-in can be a little distracting, but the classics never really go out of style or lose their magic, and that's absolutely the case for Gran Turismo 2. Get the Dracula blaring boot up midfield raceway and get ready to absolutely lose your mind in the hunt for that elusive A license. Number 12, Spyro 2. There were a lot of trilogies on PS1, but few were as consistently excellent as the OG Spyro trilogy. The first game is certainly still a brilliant platformer, but there's something about Ripto's Rage, or Gateway to Glimmer depending on which face you have on your coins, that feels like Insomniac were really getting into their groove. With more content and characters, better visuals and controls, and many more other little ingredients for this big old magic pie, Spyro 2 is the perfect middle point between the grand experiment of the first game and the arguable bloat of the third. Though Fracture Hills can forever stay in whichever portal from hell it crawled out of, Spyro 2 captured the sense of wonder better than most games on the original PlayStation, and it remains one of the best games to get lost in as you watch percentages rise even today, whether that's this original or the remake. Number 11, Vagrant Story. Vagrant Story was just one of several standout Square RPGs on the PS1, but it's also their most underappreciated. A little different from Square's other RPGs, Vagrant Story is more of a third-person adventure dungeon crawler, where Ashley Wright uses the environment to navigate around almost like a platformer as he looks to figure out the true story behind a cult. That's not all that's unique here. Combat is a blend of action and turn-based, as players can pause time and bring up a combat overlay to target specific body parts. The timing-based limb targeting takes a little bit of getting used to unless you've played any modern Fallout game, but the game's gorgeous cinematic visuals, winding complex narrative about the corruptive influence of mortality on top of every other wild swing the game takes, makes it the kind of brilliantly experimental RPG Square needs more of today. Number 10, Tomb Raider 2. Tomb Raider 2 is a stellar action-adventure third-person shooter sequel that asks the question, just how badly can you abuse your staff if you're rich? With some time to spare before she gets cancelled, Lara Croft sets out to raid some tombs and find a mysterious dagger said to turn its holder into a dragon. Lots of dragon morphing on the PS1, wasn't there? Man and Beast aim to stop Lara in her tracks, throwing everything at her from pesky bats to a massive T-Rex. The controls, which were certainly improved from the original, still may have really tested your patience, and may test them even more when you play it today, but once you got the hang of it all, there was no stopping the last surviving Croft. Until she went to France, of course. Number 9, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Few PS1 games in this list are as transportative as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, or any of the THPS games in general really. Even these days it only takes around 30 seconds of kick flipping and grinding through the hangar level until you're suddenly living in a simpler time again. While both the first and third games are great in their own right, Pro Skater 2 really captures the culture of the time perfectly, with one of the greatest soundtracks of all time, way more precise controls, and just so much to do that such a simple concept ends up offering one of the deepest experiences across the whole console. If you were lucky enough to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, whether on your baby-faced lonesome or with a group of friends crowded around the same CRT in the pursuit of more bloody videotapes, there's a good chance that this classic shaped your personality forever. Number 8, Final Fantasy IX. Released pretty late in the PS1's life cycle, with everyone eagerly awaiting the chance to do some the bouncing, Final Fantasy IX was the perfect goodbye for the franchise's best ever era. Pulling back the scale a little and the drama just a little bit more to tell a more playful story that can still go dark when it needs to, Final Fantasy IX squeezes every last drop of power still left on the OG PlayStation to offer arguably the most jaw-dropping visuals across the entire console. You don't need Steiner math to figure out why this is such a stone-cold classic. Final Fantasy IX's tighter mechanics, better gear, cheerier characters, and overall more whimsical feel makes this the perfect comfort RPG for me personally, but if you want to put Final Fantasy Tactics or even Final Fantasy VIII in this list instead, that's also totally fine by me. Number 7, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. While the first Crash was, and still is, enjoyable, its brutal difficulty curve and infuriating hitboxes made it seem like the weird experiment that it actually was. The same doesn't really apply to its sequel, Cortex Strikes Back. In this follow-up, Crash continues his platforming antics to duke it out with the villainous Dr. Neo Cortex. Many of the same mechanics return, simply fine-tuned for a more enjoyable and forgiving experience, though you're still going to want to strike the now Clancy Brown-voiced Cortex across his big dumb head with a baseball bat. The result is a delightful, challenging thrill ride that's far deeper and better looking, but also one that would solidify what exactly made the jorts-bothering Bandicoot such an icon for the next 25 years. Number 6, Tekken 3. If you never grew up with the opportunity of going around your mate's house to stay up late and end up becoming mortal enemies with them after the 6th consecutive loss from them spamming the same bastard moves as Eddie Gordo, you frankly have not lived. You'd probably wish your friend would stop living though, to be honest. The third entry in the series features a hefty roster of fighters, with Anna, Heihachi, Nina, Paul, Yoshimitsu, Jin and more getting involved in Mishima drama and eventually losing their minds over Ogre's cheap bullshit. Tekken 3 is still the absolute peak of the OG trilogy on PS1 and the fighting game genre in general for some people, with extremely clean animations that still look fantastic today and an absolutely crazy banger of a soundtrack. Chuck in 60 frames per second, a very healthy amount of modes including Tekken Force, for no reason really, and the ability to play as a bear, and you have video game heritage right here. Number 5, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. If this were a video on PS1 games that have aged the best, Symphony of the Night would almost certainly be number 1. It is an absolute beauty, and we do have that video by the way. Symphony of the Night bears the non-linear side-scrolling RPG elements of Castlevania II Simon's Quest, which went on to become the series staple in many future titles, but tucked within the gothic aesthetic is a surprisingly heartfelt narrative as son and father stand at opposite ends of the fight. Dracula, pained by the murder of Alucard's mother, seeks to end humanity, while Alucard himself wishes to stand with man and stop his father's vengeance. Symphony of the Night felt like Konami and Toru Hagihara threw everything they had into it, and while Symphony wasn't a commercial success at release, it's probably the game in an absolutely pivotal video game franchise. There have been a lot of Castlevania games before and since this one, but if there's a single game in the series that every newcomer should play at least once, it's this masterpiece. Number 4, Silent Hill. The zombie-infested Raccoon City wasn't the only iconic location on the PS1 that would get a 1-star TripAdvisor rating. In Silent Hill, Harry Mason enters the titular tumultuous town to pursue his missing daughter Cheryl and finds himself immersed in something truly sinister, as if the hectares of fog suggested you were at a scooter concert instead. Gruesome monsters, twisted visions, and a cast of strange characters pepper Harry's path, forcing him to face otherworldly terrors and survive an impossible nightmare. Silent Hill properly set the stage for a franchise that would put the U in trauma. There might have been plenty of follow-ups to the original, and some of them may have aged a lot better in some places, but from the incredible soundtrack to the hideous enemies to the sheer mystery afoot, few Silent Hill games since have managed to leave quite the same creepy, isolating impression. Just don't forget the radio. Number 3, Resident Evil 2. The incredible 1998 sequel to the No Good Terrible Night Out in the Spencer Mansion broadened the scope of having a No Good Terrible Night as the virus snaked through Raccoon City and the Raccoon Police Department. Rookie cop Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield, the rookie sister of the first game's Chris Redfield, arrived to find the city in disarray. Not many games or even movies since have captured the same feeling of despair and sheer panic from a zombie outbreak. Resident Evil 2 set the standard for the series, fleshing out a narrative that built upon the stage set in 1996 while not being afraid to lean into the superb schlockiness of it all. From the memorable monsters that basically established franchise tropes to the charming cast to the incredible B scenarios, Resident Evil 2 deserves every ounce of praise it gets more than 2 decades later. Play it now and you might be surprised by just how effective it still is. The more recent remake is also worth your time, but Resident Evil 2 on the PS1 feels like its own absolutely essential beast, one that was also an altogether different beast at one point in time. Number 2, Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid set the stage for Hideo Kojima's 2D cult stealth favourite to turn into a blockbuster 3D franchise, with so many little details that really it just puts today's games to shame. I mean, people today are still only just discovering that Liquid's parachute can be found after your helicopter battle. Kojima's masterpiece turned Metal Gear into a household name overnight, with the kind of cinematography rarely ever seen in a video game up to that point. Chuck in the sheer amount of ways of approaching most combat situations, incredibly meta Easter eggs, and some of the most iconic voice acting in any game, and you can see how Kojima's first mainstream masterpiece blew everyone away in 1998. It was an incredibly risky game to develop that simply wouldn't get made today, but whether or not you're playing it for the first or 100th time, there's going to be something in this now 25-year-old industry changer that will change the way you see video games. I think at any time, any place, people can still fall in love with Metal Gear Solid. And number 1, Final Fantasy VII. Everyone remembers where they were the first time Final Fantasy VII changed everything for them. Final Fantasy VII is a winding and emotional journey that follows protagonist Cloud Strife, who unwittingly becomes a key player in the machinations of Sephiroth, while also trying to choose between Coke and Pepsi. Pepsi all day, honestly. Engaging and complex, yet still approachable turn-based combat drives this gargantuan adventure, and Final Fantasy VII drove the gigantic boom in turn-based RPGs in particular. Final Fantasy VII is as important to RPGs as a little Italian plumber is to platformers, and just gaming in general. Well, you could honestly swap any of the top 50 around here and that'd be completely fine by me. Final Fantasy VII has to be the best PS1 game of all time, for delivering a scale never seen before, introducing the greatest cast of any role-playing game ever, and also genuinely feeling like the future of gaming was the most exciting thing to be a part of. Also for adding snowboarding in for no reason other than they could. A little bit of gaming history was being made with every swapped disc here. Just like many others on this list, Final Fantasy VII has been remade and spun off from so many times, yet it still stands as a JRPG juggernaut, even decades later, and the best PS1 game of all time. Outro gang, I'd love to know how many of these games you had down in the comments down below. Also, if you had a chipped PS1, I'd really appreciate it if you just go ahead and turn yourself in. Do the right thing. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, it's been good to have you, and I'll catch you when I catch you.